Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and help support the great work that I do by donating. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee. You can be a paid member to my Patreon channel or my Substack channel. You can also follow me on X and GETTR, TikTok, YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. Please help support the great work that I do by purchasing the products that I have. I have ebooks, supplements, and course material on immunology and pulmonology. If you like the free work that I produce, all these videos are for free, thousands of videos out there for free. Please help support the work by getting the great products and sharing the links and asking your social media to follow me. I greatly appreciate it. All right, we're going to start playing some videos, and I'll be giving you my opinion on it. But before we do, please make sure you go to my store, use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. And a great supplement that you should be taking every day is the zeolite. Zeolite will help to bind with heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals and allow you to urinate them out within 6 to 8 hours. Detoxifying your body regularly is super important because it's going to help your endocrine system and your immune system, help with your kidneys and your liver, even your brain function and cardiovascular health. Please go to my store, get the zeolite, take 3 small drops underneath your tongue, drink filtered water, do that every day. If you want a heavier detox, take 10 small drops underneath your tongue, drink the filtered water, do that every day until the bottle's done, do that once or twice a year. But it is recommended to do a maintenance dosage throughout the whole year. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the zeolite. It's powerful stuff, and detoxifying your body is super important for overall health. And when you're detoxifying your body and you're improving your immune system and your endocrine system, your other organ systems, you're slowing down the aging process. Because when you start to age, you start to accumulate toxins. And as you accumulate toxins, it's a positive feedback loop. You age further. And as you age further, you collect more toxins because your body isn't flushing them out. And therefore, you age even faster. You need to break that chain. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the zeolite. All right, let's listen in to the Obama-era officials subpoenaed.
Have your fields, hit your departments, set your price.
Get this, a federal grand jury has subpoenaed 3 high-ranking Obama-era officials because, of course, when you're a communist, spying on your enemies and having secret police is all part of the deal. And so the Justice Department is now, under Donald Trump, investigating, and they have the Trump-Russia probe.
Sources telling Fox News more subpoenas are on the way. Chinley Painter here with the latest details. Good morning, Chinley.
Hey guys, so law enforcement sources to Fox News Digital say that up to 30 subpoenas related to the probe will be issued in the coming days. It's all part of the Justice Department's investigation into the origins of the Trump-Russia probe. We know a federal grand jury has subpoenaed former CIA Director John Brennan and former FBI officials Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. The Brennan investigation came after CIA Director John Ratcliffe this summer declassified a new lessons learned review that determined the CIA, FBI, and national security agencies' intelligence community assessment, or the ICA, examining Russia's interference in the 2016 presidential election, deviated from intelligence standards that led to some, quote, procedural anomalies. And records also declassified further revealed that Brennan pushed for the Steele dossier, a discredited anti-Trump document, to be included in that 2017 ICA, even though he testified differently to the House Judiciary Committee in May 2023. Here's Brennan commenting in July about
Brennan, CIA director, should have been charged for lying to Congress. But this seems to be a habitual thing when it comes to the CIA. No, we don't want to touch the CIA. They're special. They're part of the national security state.
FBI criminal investigation.
I'm really shocked that, individuals who are willing to sacrifice their reputations, their credibility, their decency to continue to do Donald Trump's bidding on something that clearly is just politically.
Well, heaven forbid that you go against the national security state and actually show the American public that the CIA is corrupt.
As far as Strzok and Page, they first came under scrutiny in 2018 when the Justice Department uncovered a series of anti-Trump text messages between them. Both were assigned to work on Special Counsel Robert Mueller's team in 2017. And Strzok, he's the FBI agent who in July 2016 opened the FBI's initial Russia investigation. Guys?
All right, Chandler, thank you very much. And it's so important to keep in mind that the biggest fracture of the, we talk about constitutional crises. The biggest fracture, I think, in our lifetime was when the Obama administration decided at the height of a presidential campaign that they were going to launch a federal investigation into the campaign, into their opponent, their leading opponent. And everything that has happened since then is downstream from that decision. And it was a decision made in the Oval Office by Barack Obama, Joe Biden, and all of those.
It's a combination of the national security state and an overzealous Democratic Party. That's the problem. They all need to hang from a tree in front of the White House.
Yeah.
And it had such a pernicious effect because then January 6th came and they thought, oh, now we've got this news, January 6th, and then they tapped into the phones of over 160 members of Congress. We're looking at Operation Arctic Frost, and they're trying to dig into that as well. But you're right, this weaponization of government, this very communist idea of I'm going to use intel agencies that are meant to capture terrorists to go after my own political opponents. And I'm going to use the government to take down a president who was duly elected and concoct this whole Russia collusion thing, which, by the way, also had really weird implications on our foreign policy, because all of a sudden the president couldn't deal with Russia in any normal way because he was being accused of having won because of Russia. This thing was so toxic, and it all starts with Obama. When you look at Mamdani winning here in New York City as a communist, don't think about Mamdani. Think about Obama. Everything bad that's happened. Go back to Obama.
My first question, by the way, if I was doing the interviews, would be, are you guys still dating? Remember,
Strzok and Page,
yeah.
the lovers.
I think
The lovers who could smell the
trouble
Trump.
in paradise.
They could smell the.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the very high quality structural nano silver soaps that I offer. This is super important for your skin health, but also to use for the fall and the winter season. High quality soaps. These are soaps that I use. You can get it in lemongrass, charcoal tea tree, lavender, and also peppermint. And like I said before, not only are these great for your health and wellness, but they're perfect for gifts during the holiday season. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get a few bars for your household and for gifts. Share it with your friends and family. And get people to start becoming healthier by maybe making a New Year's resolution saying, hey, you're going to focus on improving your immune system and slowing down the aging process, and you're going to get healthy. That's awesome. A great way to lower the cost of healthcare is actually to look in the mirror and say, what can you do for your own health to improve your health and wellness? So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5, all caps, discount 5. You get $5 off any order. All right, let's listen in to Victor Hansen.
Hey boss, just arrived on site. Gearing up now.
Time that it's costing your business. With connecting GPS clock-ins, you'll avoid overpaying Nancy Pelosi was going to warn federal ICE agents if they acted improper, then she would order their arrest. Mayor Brandon Johnson said that he was going to actively oppose the enforcement of federal law within Chicago. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass and other city and county authorities are going to work on apps and mechanisms by which anybody would have prior notice of the location of ICE officers. Mayor Zoran Mamdani said that he is going to sever the relationship between the city of New York and federal jurisdiction authority. I suggest that all of these entities, authorities, mayors, governors read Article 6 of the Constitution, especially the paragraph known as the Supremacy Clause. Hello, this is Victor Davis Hanson for the Daily Signal.
You know what I think
Nancy
is so cool?
Pelosi-
You know what I think? You know, the podcast world has changed post-COVID, and it kind of started moving towards this direction during COVID. But I'm going to be talking about two different things that seem disparate. One is I'm starting to notice that a lot of podcasters are affiliated with some sort of organization, and then they plug certain types of, because they're an influencer and they have a lot of followers, they start plugging, different services, especially internet type services. So that's one issue that I'm noticing with a lot of podcasters is that they're part of an amalgamation of a network, kind of like a podcast network. And then, they are almost like syndicated in a way, but they're pushing products, right? So beware of these syndicated realms, right? I think just podcasters should be independent. That's my take on it. They shouldn't be part of an amalgamation. But what's interesting with Victor that I like, I think it's once in a while you learn a little bit about someone when you're looking at the background, right? I love this idea of having the Greek war helmet in the background, right? I mean, like, that's pretty cool, actually. Now, it's probably a replica, but just, I don't know his discipline in academia. I would assume it's probably early Western civilization. But I think it's pretty cool. I haven't seen anybody that actually had a Greek war helmet. All right, let's continue.
Former Speaker of the House, Congresswoman from the Bay Area in California, just said that she was going to warn federal ICE agents that if, in the opinion of state authorities, they acted in the way the state felt was improper, then she would order their arrest. Mayor Brandon Johnson said that he was going to actively oppose the enforcement of federal law within his jurisdiction in Chicago. ICE, as we remember 2 weeks ago, were blockaded, under siege, and local Chicago area law enforcement, which was requested by ICE to help them get out from being surrounded by these Antifa-like protesters, refused to come to their aid. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass and other Los Angeles city and county authorities have proudly announced that they are going to work on electronic apps and mechanisms by which anybody who is here illegally would have prior notice of the location of ICE officers, where they were headed, and therefore could evade.
Now think about this. How are apps distributed? Through an app store, all right? Like the Apple App Store, right? Or the Microsoft App Store. Google has one, or the Android App Store, right? So why can't these tech companies prevent them from distributing the app? Because the tech companies are trying to circumvent the Trump administration.
App apprehension. J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, on numerous occasions has characterized these federal officers as Gestapo Nazis, and they are acting, in his view, illegally and will be held to account by his state authorities. Mayor Zoran Mamdani says that if he were to be elected, he is going to sever the relationship between the city of New York and federal jurisdiction and authority. I don't think he meant on the beneficiary or receiving end of billions of dollars of federal monies, but rather cease all cooperation with federal authorities at his picking and choosing. This is all very dangerous. I suggest that all of these entities, authorities, mayors, governors, police chiefs read Article 6 of the Constitution, especially the paragraph known as the Supremacy Clause. In it, it details that local state authorities are subject to treaties and the laws that the federal government makes, and therefore pursuant to those laws, they are subordinate, and they must, having taken an oath to the Constitution, follow it. And they usually have done that. One time in our history, maybe in our 19th century history, they didn't. The federal government had jurisdiction over Fort Sumter. They had jurisdiction over armories in southern states. In 1861, the state of South Carolina tried to appropriate Fort Sumter and fired on it. And we know what happened next. The next 700,000 deaths for the next 4 years. We know in 1961 to 1963, we had another attempt to nullify the Supremacy Clause. Southern governors in Mississippi and Arkansas and Alabama said federal law does not apply here. The Supreme Court ruling does not apply here. In our opinion, we can run our schools the way local people want, and we're going to resist you. And the Eisenhower and then later the Kennedy administration said, no, you're not. We have the federal government's military, and we can federalize and hold you in contempt and arrest you because of the Supremacy Clause. So I would give warning to all of us that we're headed into 1861 or 1961, 1963 territory. Because can you envision that if Mayor Johnson of Chicago says he's going to stop ICE from carrying out their duties, or if a local sheriff or a city policeman is ordered by authorities in San Francisco, according to the prompt of Congressman Nancy Pelosi, to arrest an ICE officer because in their opinion, they feel that they are deporting someone who doesn't have a criminal record. Of course, it's a crime to enter the United States. So, of course, anybody here who is residing without permission from the federal government has committed a crime, both in crossing the border without authorization, secondly, residing here without authorization. But if Nancy Pelosi was going to say, we don't like the way you arrested him, we're going to arrest you. So envision a local officer with a gun or a shotgun, body armor, coming up to a federal officer with a gun and body armor and a shotgun and said, we're arresting you because you have broken San Francisco statute. And then the officer working for the federal government, that is the ICE officer, the Immigration and Custom Enforcement officer, said, no, you don't know the Constitution. You didn't read the Supremacy Clause in Article 6. You have no jurisdiction in a federal law that's being enforced by a federal officer coming out of a federal property in your state. And therefore, if you impede me, you are breaking a federal law. So then the local official says, well, you're violating our notion of how people should be arrested. So we're going to have what? 2 armed officers, one from California, one from the federal government, what, shooting it out? This seems crazy, fantastic, Victor, it's paranoid. But when a congresswoman who was at one time the 3rd most powerful person in the United States, and Jefferson Davis style, says that they're going to arrest ICE agents in their belief, their opinion that they're doing something wrong. And that's contrary to the Constitution. What is ICE supposed to do? Let them be arrested. That won't happen. So we better back off, all of us, because we're headed to an 1861 scenario, and we all know where that leads. Thank you very much. This is Victor Davis Hanson for the Daily Signal. Thank you for tuning in to the Daily Signal. Please like, share, and subscribe to be notified for more content like this.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the complete multivitamin. Why? Because this has the multivitamins that you need for proper enzymatic activity. And when your enzymes work properly, your cells work properly. And when your cells work properly, your tissues work properly. And when your tissues work properly, your organs work properly. That means your body is reaching homeostasis, and your body is healing, and your body is slowing down the aging process. When your cells don't work properly, you start to break down like an old car. And then all of a sudden, the engine doesn't work anymore and you die. So take this complete multivitamin, slow down the aging process, and stack it with the many other supplements that I have to slow down the aging process. This is something that I've been working on since I was 16 years old, on stacking certain things in a certain way to slow down the aging process. Now, back in the day of the 80s, the 1980s, it was primarily antioxidants. And then you start, and then other supplements came onto the market, either in tablet form or in powdered form, and sports medicine became more in vogue, understanding how the aging process actually happens, and geriatric care, understanding in the blue zone some of the individuals that have longevity. All this coupled together over time has allowed me to tweak my protocol. And so these supplements that I keep on telling people to get are the supplements that I use to actually slow down the aging process. And like I said, I've been tweaking this since I was 16 years old, slowly developing something that is more robust, more effective. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get this multivitamin. A good multivitamin is really important as a foundational piece to build your anti-aging longevity protocol. This is easy to digest. Go to my store, make sure you use discount 5 and you get $5 off. Now, I've been doing this for a very long time. And like I said, each decade there's something new that comes to the market that tweaks it. But it's really simple. Bringing down inflammation, detoxifying your body, soaking up free radicals. And when you couple that all together and you have a holistic approach on life, proper diet, proper exercise, filter your water, stay away from processed foods, be careful on the sugary substances, have mindfulness or spirituality in your life, bring your central nervous system to parasympathetic instead of sympathetic. That way you're more calm, getting proper sleep, learning new things, being active, some resistance training, cardiovascular, stretching, and balancing. Those are all super important. If you just do resistance training, you're doing it wrong. If you're just doing yoga, you're doing it wrong. If you're just doing stretches, you're doing it wrong. If you're only running, you're doing it wrong. You have to do all 4 modalities of exercise. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and follow my advice, and you're going to slow down the aging process, and you're going to be more healthy. When you're more healthy, you're going to have more longevity, and you're going to reduce your healthcare costs overall as you age. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, birth to Chuck. Senator Kennedy calls Schumer Schumer's comment, the dumbest thing possible. All right, let's listen in on Earth to Chuck.
Right now on the Senate floor, as they try to break through this impasse on the longest shutdown of the federal government in modern history. So Democrats are making a list of demands to get the government reopened ahead of their potential 15th vote, which could come at any time now on this Friday afternoon. Listen to what Minority Leader Chuck Schumer proposed just moments ago.
Democrats would like to see an end to this shutdown, and we want to respect Leader Thune's desire not to negotiate on ACA until after the government reopens. Therefore, we'd like to offer a simple proposal that would reopen the government and extend the ACA premium tax credits simultaneously, and then have the opportunity to start negotiating longer-term solutions to healthcare costs.
Okay, so there you are. Louisiana Senator John Kennedy joins me now. He serves on the Budget and Appropriations Committee. Senator Kennedy, welcome. Always good to have you with us. What is your response to Chuck Schumer's proposal here to keep those ACA benefits going for another year, bipartisan committee to work on those and reopen the government with a clean CR?
God, please give me patience, because if you give me strength, I'm going to need bail money. What Senator Schumer is suggesting is that we do the dumbest thing possible that won't work. Stupid should hurt more. Senator Schumer says we should just extend the status quo for a year. What does that mean? That means that we would have to take $35 billion of taxpayer money and give it directly to the health insurance companies without any commitment of lowering premiums. How is that going to reduce healthcare costs? How's that going to reduce premiums? The healthcare companies are going to take $35 billion from the taxpayers and put it into their pockets. I mean, duh. I don't know what Senator Schumer is thinking. Earth to Chuck. I mean, Earth to Chuck. Am I going to vote for this? The short answer is no.
People don't understand that every time they force you to get insurance, no matter what it is, home insurance, car insurance, medical insurance, whatever it is, insurance always goes up. Always.
Hell no. I think we're just going to have to get used to the fact that we've been in a shutdown. We're going to be in a shutdown for a while. I voted 14 times to lift the shutdown. The Democrats and Senator Rand Paul have voted 14 times to keep the government shut down. We're just going to be here for a while.
Okay, it doesn't seem like what Senator Schumer just proposed is really any different than where Democrats have been all along. They wanted $1.5 trillion. You say 36 billion. I guess there's a lot of different numbers on this package, but to keep the Obamacare benefits were expanded during COVID, and of course, once you give something, very hard to claw it back. So that's where we are right now, and so the impact is of having that extension pulled away is making people's new healthcare benefits rise. But as you say, it's not fixing the problem in terms of lowering costs. Is there any, I just spoke with the former Governor Sununu, and he said, what they need to do is accept Senator Thune's next proposal and agree on it and get Democrats across the board on it. What do you think that is going to look like?
He's just going to bring up the same resolution that he's brought up 14 times. Look, if we learned anything during this shutdown, we learned that the Obamacare Affordable Care Act exchanges, they're not working. They're not lowering healthcare costs. extending the status quo will just be putting fresh paint on rotten wood.
So, you
Why
know,
would we want to do that?
excuse me, you know, President Trump has a solution and he talked about it again today. Watch this.
I am totally in favor of terminating the filibuster. And we would be back to work within 10 minutes after that vote took place. So we passed if we terminated the filibuster. Voter ID, no mail-in voting, no cash bail, no men and women's sports, no welfare for illegals. You could go on and on. This
He's just saying you have to embrace it. You have to go for the fact that you have the House, the Senate, and the White House, and think about the things that you could get passed if you're willing to do this. Are you willing to vote to eliminate the filibuster, Senator?
Well, President Trump has made his position, at least to me, abundantly clear. I talked to him this morning. He makes a persuasive argument, but here's in essence what he's going to say, or what he has said, right? None of us want to get rid of the filibuster, but the Democrats are going to do it as soon as they're back in charge, so we might as well do it now. My response to the president this morning, after listening lightly, was, well, the quickest way, the best way to prevent all that is let's don't put the Democrats back in charge. There's no guarantee that the Democrats are going to take over the Senate in the midterm elections, or even after that. The filibuster only pertains to the Senate. It doesn't pertain to the House. So to keep the Democrats from doing that, we just hold the Senate, which we're planning on doing.
Well, that's going to be a big project, obviously, for Republicans for the next 18 months. Senator Kennedy, thank you very much. Always good to hear from you, sir. We'll see where this goes on this Friday afternoon.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the ubiquinol. Ubiquinol is the most bioavailable form of CoQ10 that you can get. Ubiquinol will soak up free radicals, help the health of your mitochondria, boost up your ATP levels, and ubiquinol helps the health of your neurons. Like I said, one of the aftershocks from the crisis that we went through in 2020 will be 40-year-olds or older within the next 5 years will get early onset of dementia. Yeah. 30%. So think about the number of people that you know that are 40 years of age or older. 30% of them are going to get dementia, early onset of dementia. There's going to be 3 types. So out of that 30%, 75% of the 30% will get microclotting or microbleeding that will lead to neural death, slow neural death. 24.9% will get approximately this amyloidosis, this buildup of plaque. And 0.1 to approximately 0.5%, because the amyloidosis could be 24.5 to about 24.9%. 0.5 to 0.1% will get prion disease. Why is this happening? Because there's an inflammatory response that leads to vascular problems, the inability of proteins to be folded correctly, the inability of the cell, the neurons to be able to clear the protein misfolds, because the body has a mechanism to clear out misfolded proteins. But when it gets to a point where it can't, because of this chronic inflammation, it builds up. And if certain types of proteins that have high beta sheets will lead to this buildup of plaque, and certain types of proteins could lead to prion disease. So you need to start paying attention. You need to protect your neurons and keep that inflammation down. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the ubiquinol, soak up those free radicals, have the mitochondrial health improved, so you have more energy, and take the ubiquinol to protect that neuron. But also stack it with these supplements that I keep on talking about that brings down the inflammation. Super important. Please go to my store, use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. All right, let's listen in to the most US companies announced most October job cuts in over 20 years.
Yeah, whether there would be a lot of layoffs coming because the economy is slow, because of the tariffs, because of other economic policies. And we may be starting to see that turning point. It's been slower than anticipated. The question is, how many of these are actually in the United States and how many of them are going to be carried out in the near future? The Challenger numbers came out today, the biggest jump since 2003, biggest number of layoffs announced in October. But that again it's just announcements. So we have to wait and see how this plays out. And when you look at some of the companies like Amazon, with all the layoffs they announced, they still give people 90 days notice. So you won't see this.
Let's look at this chart here. U.S. employers announced fewest hiring plans since 2011. All right. U.S. October job cuts announcements. Challenger reading for October of each year. 2020, 81K. 2021. So this is the October job cuts announcements. In 2020, 81K. In 2021, 23K. In 2022, 34K. 2023, 37K. So it's been ticking up since 2021. In 2024, 56K. And in 2025, 153K. So part of this is probably overstaffing or overstaffing during the COVID era, and they're slowly titrating them out. But this big jump from 56K to 153K, there's more to the story than just overstaffing during the COVID years. This is probably implementation of AI, and coupled with the potentiality of revenues going down. That we're going into a cycle business, a lower activity business cycle.
Go up in any data for a couple of months.
Okay, so I think J. Powell and others had characterized this labor market as a low hire, low fire. Is it morphing into something different, like a low hire, a pickup in fire?
Well, that's what the Fed wants to know, and we don't have good ways of tracking that, other than maybe the initial jobless claims. Each state puts them out, so we get them at 4:30 p.m. today, and we will adjust them for seasonals and things like that, and have a pretty good idea of roughly where.
Wait, this is separate from the weekly jobless claims that comes out from the government.
This is the data that goes into the weekly jobless claims, but the Labor Department is not tallying it now and not adjusting it. We do that ourselves. We can't call DoorDash to come do that. So we do that, and we'll have a pretty good idea of what the numbers are. And last week was 218,000, so it was nothing. So if there is a turning point, it's not showing up in the data yet. Now, you might see a change in unemployment, except that there's no unemployment report on Friday. So,
all right. Well, the good friends, we have a capital economics data structure research note in my inbox, and the question is, why is hiring soft despite resilient GDP? Their answer is lower immigration, increased use of AI, and cyclical weakness outside of the main tech sectors are the key reasons for the slowdown in private sector hiring this year. That doesn't seem like anything that we can turn around on a dime. It just feels like some of those things are a little bit.
That's exactly what I said. It's a combination of AI and a downturn in the overall economy's activity.
If the Fed can do anything about it, you can cut interest rates, but all that means is it costs you less to buy into AI and get rid of people. So that's part of the debate: is what are they going to do about it? Can they do anything about it? Is it worth it to cut? Because they want to stimulate demand by cutting interest rates, but if demand doesn't increase employment, it doesn't do any good. Challenger made essentially the same point in terms of the layoffs, that a lot of it is AI, the slowing economy, and they also say Doge, but they're counting in the government layoffs that hit in October for the first time really into the data. So there's a lot going on in the jobs area, but the question is, can anything fix it at this point, or are we going to just have to go through
A cycle.
a cycle? Exactly.
You know, if I go to EcoGo on the Bloomberg terminal, you still have the consensus estimate for the non-farm payrolls, the monthly jobs report available, even though we know it's going to be delayed. How do economists put together their estimates if they don't have the September data to work from? I mean, are they kind of just stabbing in the dark right now?
You would be stabbing in the dark. You'd be looking at the other indicators that we do get, the ISM numbers, the ADP numbers, things like that, and try to match them up to what's happened in previous months, with similar numbers. But it is just a shot in the dark at the moment because you don't have the October baseline. You don't have the September baseline for the October numbers. So it's kind of hard. But what's funny is I looked at that yesterday, and the consensus was for 38,000 jobs, and now it's for what, minus 20? So
Yes, exactly.
it's like all these guys just piled in with the negative numbers because they think things are sounding bad. One thing I point out from Challenger is they say that seasonal hiring plans are the lowest since they started tracking them in 2012.
Really?
So
Robots are getting
that
the
could
jobs.
say something
Yeah,
beyond the labor market, could talk about what retailers are thinking is going to happen.
Level up your credit card game with the new Crypto.com Visa Signature Credit Card. Spend.
All right, let's go to The Economist. Are rich countries facing a debt crisis? Now, this is in the context of obviously the United States being in debt of $38 trillion and a deficit of a budgetary deficit of approximately $2 trillion. But also the doom loop with France and in the UK. Now, when you are a country like the UK and France that's having serious financial difficulty, and your central banks can't unravel the debt that it bought during the Lehman crisis and the COVID crisis, they can't do quantitative tightening. Let's use that term. It causes the government to have to make hard choices, and they're not making the hard choices. They have to tell their society that the social programs, the safety nets that they have funded for decades will have to be truncated, if not eliminated, to be able to make the society more viable. But in addition, they have to increase the tax base, especially on the wealthy. But both sides, the rich don't want to be taxed, and the poor wants to maintain their social programs. Now, the United States is a little bit better off in terms of the doom loop compared to the UK and France, but it's coming. The canary in the coal mine is the UK, and it causes not just economic instability, but also political instability. Look what's happening in France and in England. Constant turnover in terms of their governments. And we're seeing in the United States this almost like vitriol and balkanization and hatred on both sides of the aisle. It's become, a cage match. So this is not healthy for society at all. And then you throw in AI and robotics. I mean, Optimus from Tesla saying that they're going to sell these robots for $20,000. Tesla stock's going to go to the moon, but the thing is that shortly after that, no one's going to have a job. I don't see how if a government and a household has debt, how are you going to pay off that debt when everyone's laid off? How? You'd have to have a jubilee. You have to have some sort of debt forgiveness. You'd have to have some sort of sabbatical, some sort of great reset. in terms of finances. People were talking about the Great Reset during COVID. Great Reset wasn't COVID. Get real. Never happened. But there may be a Great Reset with major implementation of humanoids in the job market. All right, let's continue here.
Just take us through what's been happening to public debt in advanced economies.
It's at a really historical high across advanced economies. It's
and the reason why,
and
The Economist promotes Keynes. All right, they don't promote Hayek. But you have developed economies that have pushed a Keynesian monetary policy and fiscal policy, where whenever there's a crisis, even if it's somewhat benign, you just keep on funneling. So a regular recession, print more money and create more fiscal stimulus from the government, even with a benign recession. And then all of a sudden, you may have crises like Lehman and COVID, where you go in and print even more money and buy assets and have even more unproductive fiscal policy. And eventually, it comes home to roost. Eventually, the debt builds up to a point where the society is no longer functioning, because the Keynes never had an intention to pay it back. Now, they didn't even pay attention to Keynes. Keynes wasn't Keynesian. That's the weird thing about it. Keynes wasn't this ultra, interventionist, where every time you go in and print more money and every time there's a problem that you have a fiscal stimulus. What happened was that the Keynesians took what Keynes said and put it on steroids. They accentuated it. They applied it to everything. This is where the term political economy comes in, or a political economist, right? Because they thought that they could engineer the economy every time there's a downturn. Oh, you create more debt, don't worry about it. Well, it's now a time to worry about it. So we're at this point because of these individuals that thought that there's a free ride in monetary policy, in fiscal stimulus. Now, Keynes said you intervene and then you tax later. You intervene and tax later. What happened? You intervene and there's no taxes later to pay off the debt. So we're at this point because The Economist promoted Keynes. And so Keynes is just the beginnings of this socialism. And then you take it one step further. People in intelligentsia took the policies of Keynes, used it to pacify the masses every time there was an economic downturn, because not every economic downturn is a depression. Get real. All right? They applied it. There were periods of time where there were wars that were waged, and that built up additional debt. But it was never paid back. It was always kick the can down the road. Now, there's this debt cliff, this doom loop that's taking place. So you had Keynes pushing socialism. Then you had the Keynesians pushing socialism even further. And then you have these individuals now pushing Marxism. Thank you very much. Now, the intelligentsia actually produced, over many, many decades, a lot of debt, a not productive society, especially as of yesteryear. And now we have Mamdani pushing democratic socialism. Democratic socialism is an appendage from Keynes. Keynesian, the Keynesian economist. And the Keynesian economist is an appendage from Keynes. Now, Keynes wasn't a Marxist, but it was a slippery slope that took place. And now all of a sudden you have these countries that are over indebted. Brought to you by The Economist.
Since the Napoleonic War. Why has this happened? It's happened for a few reasons. One is that in recent years we've had, or recent decades, I should say, we've had a series of crises: the global financial crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic, the energy crisis in Europe, which has led to sort of.
And they were using Keynesian economics, and they didn't even follow the comma after when Keynes was explaining what you need to do. It was intervene, comma, then tax after the crisis is over, period. They forgot to read past the comma.
Public debt, but it's also because politicians just seem addicted to big deficits. They really struggle at the moment to
because the politicians want to be in power. They want to be liked. They need the vote. And the stupid people, the plebs, constantly think that there is a free ride. And eventually the system can't handle it and it breaks. And that's where we're at right now. We have a broken economy. We have a broken society that's heavily in debt, and that's at the sovereign level, and that's also at the private level. So when AI starts to take your job away and you're never going to get employed again, how are you going to pay off your debts? How are you going to live? How's the country going to pay off their debts? You're talking about a major structural change in society. It is the ultimate test of a constitutional republic. And the way I'm seeing it, it's probably going to fail. It's probably going to succumb to socialism, communism.
Continues to mount up, and that's got more fundamental political causes, if you like.
I think the sort of fascinating thing being here is how much of you could call it a studied indifference there is. It's the elephant in the room. Nobody wants to look straight into the sun and engage with this direct.
It's called a gray rhino, bitch. Another pseudo-intellectual.
I think there's a bit of triumphalism to some degree. The US recoveries from global financial crisis and from the COVID pandemic were substantially stronger than most developed economies. And there's a sort of vibe, a sort of idea that American growth will sort of rescue the country from these things. To the extent that people want to talk about them at all, there is, I would say, very little energy on either side of the political divide for seriously looking at deficit and the public debt and looking at ways that it might be resolved.
If you go back, and this is true across advanced economies, if you go back and look at the debt that was projected, inevitably the debt ends up higher. That's partly because the budget forecasters aren't looking at whether there's going to be a pandemic, for instance, or the outbreak of war. That's not part of budget forecast, but it's also because in some cases, for example, in Britain, there's just been too much optimism about productivity growth. So
easy money helped to accelerate the problems with Lehman. More money was sloshing around, creating derivatives that led to a financial breakdown. On top of your regulators, the bank regulators weren't paying attention. Why were there dark pools, especially in the derivatives market, in the swap market? That should have never happened. But because the financial lobbying group captures Congress, Congress wasn't willing to do anything about it. Some of these derivative markets should be closed, not allowed to happen. And there sure as hell needs to be more regulation on these banks to make sure that they don't blow up the economy. And the ones that do should be held accountable. Not just financially, but also criminally.
you have this overall picture of high debts, high deficits, pressure on the public finances. You've got aging populations, which mean more spending on healthcare and on pensions. You've got the pressure, especially in Europe, spend more on defence. You've got the green transition. And it's not just that debts are high, interest rates since the pandemic have gone up a lot, so more and more spending's going on interest payments as well. So you have this upward pressure on debt. And then you get to the fact that even if you do write down a forecast incorporating all those things, you're probably, if history is any guide, being too optimistic about where debt is heading. So you put that all together and it is quite an alarming picture. Japan showed for a long time that you can have high debt and low interest rates. If we go back to a low rate world, you can have high debt again. But what high debt means is that you're vulnerable, because the higher your debt, the smaller the increase in interest rates needed for you to suddenly have a really bad problem and to all of a sudden face a choice between economic crisis or doing quite deep austerity and quite deep adjustments. Even if you can get to a situation that looks stable, the higher your debts, the more easy it is for things to suddenly become unstable when circumstances and especially global interest rates change.
So a more conventional way, possibly, is to raise revenue, is for governments to raise more revenue or to shrink their spending. And what are the prospects for taxes to go up in the rich world, do you think, Henry?
Basically varies by geography. If the United States wanted to correct course fiscally with taxes tomorrow, it could do it. And actually, in a speech by Greg Mankiw, who's a Harvard economist recently, I think he has some line where he says, if you wanted to fix this problem over the weekend, you could. The US has no value-added tax. It's the value-added tax, which lots of European states have, is quite a low-impact tax on the economy. And you can raise a lot of money with it. And traditionally, Republicans in the US have opposed that tax precisely because it's such an easy way to raise money and make the government bigger. But America's taxes are low enough that they could do that. But the political will isn't there to do it. And then you have a kind of range. Japan is kind of between Europe and the US. In Britain, there's a lot of talk about taxes being at historical highs, which is true. But Britain has been on the low end of the European range historically. But another thing to remember is the higher your taxes are, the more important it is that they're well-designed taxes. And if we're going to go into a populist moment where your tax system is going to be, wealth taxes and all kinds, you're not going to pay heed to economic efficiency and to growth arguments, then you might do damage at lower levels of taxes as well. So I'm not optimistic, basically, about solving the problem through tax.
The problem is that cutting spending is going to be very difficult as well. You've got pressures, as Henry, you were talking about, you've got pressures on the budget from defence spending, from the need to decarbonise, and those pressures are even stronger in Europe, which has to really up its defence budgets to match the new NATO commitments. And then on top of that, you've got an ageing population, which means a bigger pension bill, and which also means that it's quite hard to win support for any cuts to benefits. And I think we have a chart which illustrates this. Here we go. And this is a chart that shows federal spending in America, but the picture is broadly the same in other rich countries. And you see that about 2/5 of spending goes on age-related benefits. And defence here is not growing in America as a share of total spending, but it will be in Europe. So the pressures on the budget are large, and the political will possibly to shrink it is hard to imagine. Do you agree with that, Henry?
Yes. I love this chart because it basically shows how the purpose of government has almost completely changed in half a century. When government starts, it's about national defence, and in that other category, you have infrastructure spending, for instance, another thing people complain about being too low. Then gradually, over time, the government sort of turns into this insurance company that provides old age benefits, and there's a little bit of Medicaid in there growing, you can see as well, which is health insurance for the poor.
And what does that mean? It means that the baby boom generation is pulling social services, pulling tax revenue to benefit their generation, and creating a wake for future generations that have to deal with the debt. Self-centeredness. The baby boom generation right here. That's a classic. That's what happened. They've been in power for a long time. Long time. Gen X has not been in power yet for the presidential election. The baby boom generation has been in power since Bill Clinton in the United States. Barack Obama, baby boom generation, near the tail end of it. He's not, Gen X is not there yet.
Bucket. And why does that happen? Well, it happens in conjunction with the aging population because you have more elderly people. The retirement age doesn't go up in line with life expectancy for a long time. And also the political power of an aging population is very great. You know, in the mid-20th century, when the welfare states got going, people said, you know, they will be captured by populists at the ballot box. But people like Milton Friedman, had this concern that you'd have a kind of populist coalition of the middle classes voting themselves benefits. No one really saw that what you would have is this elderly electorate making it impossible to cut pension spending. But that's what you've got. So it's just very, very difficult to see how politicians can resist that pressure. But then look at the rest of the budget. What else is there to cut, really? There isn't much less. So again, I'm Mr. Pessimist over here. I find it difficult to see the spending adjustments.
You have to kill the social programs. It's that simple. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the Max 35. See, this is the reason why I keep on telling people to take the anti-aging protocol and boost up your immune system. Because the solution for your health isn't to depend on the government, and the solution to the health of the society isn't to depend on the government. You have to take charge of your own health. And when you do that, and everyone in the society is doing that, healthcare costs will go down. Please go to my store, get the Max 35 or the Cleanse. Max 35 is 35 parts per million. Cleanse is 30 parts per million. Take a teaspoon a day every day. Swish in your mouth, gargle it about 20 seconds, and then swallow it. And that will boost up your immune system, help your oral hygiene and your oral pharynx, maintain a mucosal barrier, and improve the health of your epithelial cells. By doing that, you're boosting up your immune system. And when you're boosting up your immune system and you're taking it regularly, you're actually slowing down the aging process. Why? Because you're not chronically sick. Also, go to my store and get the heirloom barley. Heirloom barley will detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals. When you're doing that on a regular basis, your immune system, your endocrine system will perform better. By bringing down inflammation, you're also helping your cardiovascular system. You're reducing the buildup of plaque. And by bringing down inflammation at the brain level, guess what? You're keeping your neurons healthy. And remember what I said. When neurons have lots of inflammation, it causes neural death or misfolded proteins that could build up plaque. So you don't want that. You want to keep that inflammation down. Very important. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the heirloom barley. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. All righty, let's listen in. This is Trump administration about SNAP.
Emergency auto land activating.
Ooh, time is your shift, sir.
I'm not going to hot yoga, Linda.
The Supreme Court granting the Trump administration's emergency appeal to temporarily block a court order to fully fund SNAP food aid payments amid the government shutdown.
The order coming as the Agriculture Department was working to comply with the previous order to provide November SNAP benefits.
Here to react is Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins. Brooke, it's so great to have you back. We've been talking about ratings. So last week we had you on to talk about SNAP. You posted that and you got 40 million views. I want to ask you about what's happening with that ruling last night, but tell me why you think that went so viral.
Well, it's interesting, Rachel. I have been doing this for a really long time, and we talked about this last Saturday, that, listen, people want the government open. They want those who are the most vulnerable, who are hungry, to make sure that they are fed. That's the SNAP program. But within all of that, the level of fraud and corruption and double dipping and selling benefits is astounding. And I think it hit a nerve with America to have our discussion, 40 million people watch it, about how corrupt the SNAP program is, how we have to fix it. I think just tells you that Americans are paying attention and they're not okay with government as usual. We need to clean the house up, and that's what we're doing.
So the Center for Immigration Studies has found that anywhere from 50 to 60% of households that are headed by illegal immigrants rely on SNAP benefits and other programs similar to that. Is there a problem with that?
Well, we, at almost the very beginning, I think on my first day, I sent a letter to every governor in America saying, send us your data. No illegal aliens on any SNAP or food stamp or WIC program, period, full stop. Everyone said, oh, no, we're not doing that. It is illegal. I mean, it is not allowable. However, the 29 states, mostly red states, that sent us their data, what we found was really astounding. And now we're in lawsuits to get the rest of the data so that we can work to fix this. So there is no doubt that there is a massive, massive fraud in the program. But having said that, the Democrats have voted 15 times to not fund SNAP. There are legitimate families in this country that rely on that program to feed their family. We got to get the government open.
Right. So, Madam Secretary, what is your reaction to this judge's ruling?
Well, so last night, just to very quickly summarize for everyone, the Constitution, basically the executive branch takes the money from Congress, from the legislative branch. This goes back to the very beginning. We just can't create money out of the sky. That's not how the United States works. It's interesting, the No Kings rally, right? Where they said, we don't want a king in America, except now they want a king that can create money out of the sky, the clear blue sky. And so a very leftist judge in Rhode Island said, oh, go create the money, everybody, go find it. And then the First Circuit basically agreed with that. But last night, y'all, Judge Ketanji Brown, no great friend of, free market and constitutional government, said, no, we need to stay this for 48 hours. The First Circuit needs to take another good look at this, that this probably is not constitutional. You can't just create money to fund a program that Congress uses to fund.
All right, Secretary, we want to get to this because President Trump just posted this on social media last night. It says, while cattle prices have dropped substantially, the price of box beef has gone up. Therefore, you know that something is fishy. We will get to the bottom of it very quickly. There's criminality.
I've noticed that beef prices have radically went up compared to last year. Now, maybe that's just a New York thing, but there's something weird about beef costs.
A steep price. And we're looking at right now on our screen, I don't know if you can see it, just the increase in beef prices, for ground beef or steaks, et cetera.
Yeah, I've seen them. The largest ones are for steaks and like a roast, like a 3 or 4 pound roast kind of thing. So they're saying 18% up for uncooked beef roasts, 16% up for beef steaks. It's crazy. It's crazy.
So I want you to address what the president's talking about, possible collusion or monopolies among the meat packers. But then I also want you to address something that we've been talking a lot about on the couch, which is the overregulation of processing, so that I don't personally want my meat straight from like these big, huge slaughterhouses and meat packing places. I want it to come from a small local place, but they're overregulated and they can't compete. So address both of those things.
That's right. Well, a couple of really important points here. First, that the president's promise to Americans to make America affordable again, so that you, as a mom, Rachel, of many children, myself, we are able to put the best food on the table. We can afford it. We don't have to skip over that part of the grocery store because it's too expensive. So that's the first part. The second part is that this president is so focused on American families, the American dream, and American farmers and ranchers. In the last decade, we've lost over 107,000 ranchers in this country as the entire industry has consolidated. And what the president was talking about yesterday is 85% of our beef in America goes through 4 big companies. 2 of those are not even American-owned companies. So these are massive policy challenges, how much we pay for our beef, where it's sourced from, and whether we've got a national security issue on our hands, right? You can't feed yourself. You're not secure as a nation. So that's what the president was really focusing on yesterday. And I think it's really, really important. Rachel, to your point, you and I've talked a lot about this, the make America healthy again, how we get better, more nutritious foods. The fact that a cattle rancher in Virginia has to haul his cattle to the middle of the country, Nebraska, to get processed, and then who knows where it goes.
That's crazy.
We are opening up the markets. We released a pretty significant plan 2 weeks ago, supporting smaller ranchers, supporting local processing. We'll have a lot more coming on that, supporting in-state sales across the state line. USDA doesn't have to be a part of all of that. We can rely on our states to do it.
Amen.
So I'm excited. I think there's so much we're going to be able to do.
We're excited too. We're obsessed with this. Come back and give us all the updates. We want them.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
I will. Thank y'all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you all. But I have definitely noticed a price appreciation in beef in the last year. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin C and magnesium and the magnesium and zinc. Both of them can be stacked. You can stack these together. Both of them will help with your immune system and your brain function. Magnesium increases the efficacy of vitamin D3. It's important to take this every day. If you're not feeling well, take a double dose. Take one in the morning, take one in the evening. It's really important to boost up your immune system. Take it every day, especially in the fall and the winter season. And vitamin C and magnesium supplement will also help with your skin. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the magnesium and zinc, boost up that immune system and brain function. Super important. And get the probiotics. You can get it in VeggieCap or in powdered form. Taking a good probiotic will help with your gut biome, allow you to absorb your nutrients, digest your foods easier, increase your mucosal lining, and increase your concentration of IgA, which is a type of antibody. Super important to boost up that immune system in your gut. Good health starts at the gut. And by improving your gut biome, you're improving the communication between your gut and your liver, so your metabolism is better, and your gut and your brain. You'll be able to sleep better, you'll get rid of that brain fog, you'll be able to consolidate memory and detoxify your central nervous system. Also, with a good gut biome, you're going to improve your skin. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the probiotic either in VeggieCap form or in powdered form. Take it every day, drink it with filtered water. Make sure you use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order.
Read on the terminal today, comparing the U.S. economy to a Jenga tower. Why?
Yeah, I think you're right. This is increasingly talked about now, and what we're seeing is that spending is increasingly being driven by those top 20% and even the top 10% of earners. So obviously spending is hugely important to the U.S. economy. It drives 2/3 of economic activity. And the more you concentrate that in one group of people, the more fragile things become, right? So folks are comparing it to a Jenga tower where you're just removing pieces from the bottom and now the middle parts of the tower, and it's becoming more and more top heavy. Well, at some point, does it fall down?
I really enjoy that imagery there of a Jenga tower, Katarina. We do see, as we mentioned earlier, the stock market down today, but it is important to know that the S&P 500 has returned more than 15% this year. I know that the market isn't necessarily the economy here, but what is your sense on the divide between stocks and the U.S. consumer?
Well, I think what it's showing is that that those stock market gains are really supporting the consumption you're still seeing at the top, because we know that stock ownership is really a divided thing in this country as well, right? Most, only not a huge amount of people in the US own stocks. It's concentrated in the wealthiest individuals. And so when stocks do well, the wealthy spend or keep spending or feel confident enough to spend, right? But it doesn't really help those at the bottom or even a lot of those in the middle because they don't own stocks. In a lot of cases, they also don't own other assets that have been appreciating quickly, like homes, right? So they're not benefiting from those gains. So yes, absolutely, the stock market is still up. The economy is still growing by many measures pretty robustly. So we're not, looking at an imminent recession, but it is, these little things do start to add up and they just do create a kind of more fragile landscape for the economy.
Yeah, Katarina, because I think you spoke to Peter Atwater, who I'm a big fan of, who really coined that phrase K-shaped recovery. And I know he was posting on social media today about there being a longer leg to the bottom of the K and that upper leg getting a bit smaller, more pinched. What's your read of the state of the economy? Are we continuing to see really the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% of consumers carrying and people having to downgrade? And what are we hearing from companies reporting earnings on that?
Yeah, I think that is really what you're hearing right now. When the economy started recovering from the pandemic, you had pretty widespread benefits at that point. You had lower income folks really seeing their wages increase at a good clip, outpacing inflation and rising faster than wages for those at the top. And now you're really seeing that reverse, which is not a very common situation for the US economy when wages for the higher income earners are rising at a faster pace than those for the bottom. And you're hearing it from companies as well. Across earnings, really over the past few weeks, we've heard that companies are really seeing their bottom line buoyed by those at the top, by luxury spending, things like that. Whereas, the lower end consumers are really not spending. Spending has kind of flatlined. And now, worryingly, you're seeing that creep into more of those middle income consumers. So I think that's where you get into this image of the K, where the bottom leg is really getting bigger. It's like people are going from perhaps they were, toward the bottom of that top leg, but now they're hopping down to the bottom leg and their fates are worsening a little bit.
So, of course, we know the shutdown has prolonged to be the longest in all of U.S. history here. And we do have the Challenger data, but clearly no inflation data. We are experiencing, of course, a data drought here. But the Fed's Austin Goolsbee pointed to this as a driver of the unease regarding rate cuts. How does this lack of data actually impact expectations for the Fed's next move?
Yeah, I mean, you've really seen expectations come up for the next Fed move, right? First, before the October meeting, markets were really expecting like 100% chance of another rate cut in December. Now that's really come up now. Part of that was Chair Jerome Powell in his post-meeting press conference in October, really saying that it's not a foregone conclusion that they were going to cut again. But a lot of it is also these comments you're hearing from an increasing number of Fed officials. And they're basically saying that when things are foggy, when the outlook is uncertain, and when we're not getting new information from really reliable data sources like the government, the prudent thing is just slow down, right? You don't want to kind of depend on data that's now 3 months old in some cases. So you're hearing just more and more Fed officials calling for, hey, let's take a beat, let's maybe not move in December, and let's just see where things are.
Stuart, I want to start with you and have you parse Rita's comments for a second. The economy, he said,
All right.
it's in good shape. Do you agree?
We're going to go to the tariff trial that's at the Supreme Court. Before we do, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Myotrol. Myotrol will help to build muscle, maintain muscle. It reduces atrophy. When you get older, you just don't express the genes to build muscle and to maintain. So roughly around age 40 for males and females, you start to lose muscle. Myotrol will help with that gene expression to build muscle and maintain muscle and help with the health of your mitochondria so you have the energy to maintain that muscle. This has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help with that gene expression. Take this every day and do some resistance training throughout the week to build up muscle, especially your back muscles. Focus on back muscles too. That's an underdeveloped area. And by improving your posture and developing those back muscles, you're going to improve your lymphatic flow and your venous return flow. Super important for overall health. And you're strengthening your back and improving the density of the vertebrae. So this is part of a longevity protocol. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com and get the Myotrol. Take it every day. Please go to my store, use discount 5, save some money. Discount 5, all caps, discount 5. You get $5 off.
Is whether or not the president has violated the Constitution. Because again, we have to go all the way back to the founding of our country. You know, no taxation without representation is on that license plate on everybody in the District of Columbia. And what it really is saying is the Constitution gives to the Congress, not to the president, the power to impose taxes or tariffs. The Constitution gives to the Congress, not to the president, the right to regulate foreign commerce. So the issue is, how is it that President Trump can now start to impose all of these tariffs? Again, this huge increase in taxes on Americans without the Congress.
The Constitution explicitly gives to Congress the authority to impose tariffs.
Yes.
Can Congress delegate that authority, and has it in this statute?
Right. And so the issue that is really before the court is whether or not the Congress has handed over this power that it has. It has the power to impose tariffs or duties or taxes. Did it grant that authority, hand it over to the president through the passage of this law, the International Economic Emergency Powers Act? And the decision will largely turn on one phrase in this IEPA statute, the phrase that says that the Congress delegated the authority to regulate importation or exportation. And so the issue is, can you read the word regulate to be the same thing as tax or tariff? And the argument that most people are making, that many members of Congress, that many of the business groups and many of the others that say the answer to that question is no, Congress did not hand over the authority, point to the fact that nowhere in this IEPA statute does the word tariff or duty appear.
If the Supreme Court upholds what the president's done,
Hold on.
so what happens? We keep charging the tariffs. What if it actually strikes it down? What is the remedy if, in fact, the court rules that these tariffs were illegal or unconstitutional?
So if the court rules that the tariff.
All right. It's very odd. Come on, there's too many damn idiots.
As we enter the AI super cycle, latency becomes a currency. And that means the data needs to be processed as close to the.
So if
the problem is, and this is my take on it, and I'm a Republican, but I'm a strong constitutionalist, right? But interpretation of what the Constitution is may change over time. All right, there's a zeitgeist of the reading of the Constitution, unfortunately. But I think the original intent is really important, or the textualization of certain words at the time of the writing shows the intent of the founders. Okay, with that said, and I read the recent book from Amy Barrett about this particular subject matter, about actually interpreting the Constitution. It's a great read. I don't think she's a great writer per se, but I think it was an important read to understand how the sausage is made at the Supreme Court. I think she did a good job in that. Maybe she wrote it, maybe she didn't. I don't know, but it's under her name. I don't know if she had a ghostwriter. I suspect that she probably did have a ghostwriter. But okay, with that, the Supreme Court is going over this tariff case, and most of the justices are zooming in on this concept that did Congress give authority to the executive branch for taxation, especially in an emergency? And then, are we in an emergency or are we not? Now, I personally think that the particular statute that the administration is using to issue tariffs is probably faulty, and that we're not in a quote an emergency. Now, one would have to define an emergency. Is an emergency over a 5-year period? Is it an emergency imminent, where it's within days, weeks? What's the duration of an emergency? What's the event horizon of the emergency? When's the sunsetting of the emergency? That has to be teased out. Now, I personally think that the Trump administration will lose at the Supreme Court on this, because I don't think that Congress gave the authority to the executive branch to have carte blanche authority on taxation. The problem comes in is that Congress should be doing their job and stating, we are going to issue tariffs. We're going to be focused on certain types of industries to make sure that we bring back our manufacturing and we have war prowess, especially if we have a conflict with China. It's in Congress's power to do this. The Supreme Court isn't saying that Congress can't issue tariffs and give certain special privileges that are sunset, that have a sunset clause for the executive branch. So Congress, we're at this point where Trump's administration is at the Supreme Court litigating this issue about tariffs, because Congress isn't willing to do their job. Now, who's pushing this? Who's pushing the lawsuit? Who's pushing this? It's corporate. Now, corporate doesn't want to be taxed. Corporate has normally kept the taxations or the tariffs away because they captured Congress through K Street, through the PACs, through the campaign financing. And they tell the representatives in Congress, in the upper house and the lower house, don't have tariffs. Even though it's within your power, don't do tariffs. That's bad for the economy. That's bad, but it's really bad for their business. Because what happens is that when you bring back manufacturing, you're reducing the transnational capitalists, the globalist corporations, with the higher margin. You're reducing their high margin. Because what they do is they go to a low-cost center with less regulation and then sell the product back to the United States for a higher amount than if they were making it for a higher amount than what they made in the foreign country, right? So they have a profit. But if you compare that, if they made it domestically and they sold it at the same price, they would make less of a profit. Their margins would be less. So they're doing this labor arbitrage to have higher margins. Now, why do they need the higher margins? Because they have a stock price that they have to keep on justifying higher stock prices. And the only way to do that is to create more revenue, reduce expenses, or both. That's how it works. So they either create new products that people want, or the existing products have to have more margin. So you have to raise price or reduce costs or both. So if you bring back manufacturing to the United States, you're reducing this margin. So Nike, for example, they do their designs here, but they manufacture overseas. It costs them $10 to make a shoe or less, but they sell it to you for $150 or $125 or even more. Some shoes are less, but the average cost of Nike shoe is probably about $100 to $125 for a $10 shoe. Now, if they made it in the United States, it'd probably be about $25. They still have a decent profit, but it wouldn't be as much. And therefore, their high stock price would be brought down. So it's really about convincing Wall Street and investors to purchase and maintain shares in their company. They don't care about what's going on in the United States. They don't care about gutting the manufacturing and having economic prowess against our enemies. They don't care about that. All they care about is their quarterly report and how it'll look on Wall Street. So they're doing labor arbitrage. So these companies, they band together and they prevent Congress from actually levying tariffs on certain goods that may benefit the United States in the long run if we brought back some of that manufacturing and build up that economic clustering. So the real issue here isn't so much is Trump right or wrong on the use of these tariffs under a certain statute. The real issue is that Congress didn't do their job because they're captured by corporate special interests. Now, I'm a Republican, I'm a capitalist and all this, but I also realize that unfettered capitalism could be dangerous. And this hyper-globalization that we've had has gutted our manufacturing, reduced our economic clustering, and has made us less viable. Now, another bone of contention here is that Congress doesn't want to levy the tariffs on these companies because because these congressmen are captured, right? And these companies don't want to lose their profit margin. But also Congress knows that to keep getting voted in, they have to tell their constituents that they're going to get freebies. Well, the only way to pay for the freebies is to issue more debt because no one wants to be taxed. So they issue more debt. Who's going to buy the debt? The foreign companies, the foreign nationals will buy the debt because you have a foreign company that's making products and selling to the United States. The United States gives them dollars, American dollars, and they got to do something with those American dollars. And they usually buy bonds. They usually buy American bonds. And therefore, the government has the money that's coming in to fund the freebies with interest payments that go to the foreign countries. Now, people need to realize the only way to get revenues into the government are through tariffs, through taxes, and through debt issuance. The problem is that taxes reduce your ability as a consumer to purchase goods. If you're too taxed, you won't purchase goods because you don't have disposable income. If you issue too much debt, eventually the society, its tax revenue has to go to interest payments instead of to social programs or to infrastructure. So the society is less productive. And the tariffs, part of the tariff is going to be taxing the actual consumer, and part of it will be taxing the actual corporation. And it's not cut and dry. Not 100% goes right to the end user. So sometimes corporations absorb it, and it depends on the category. That's how it works. Now, for the society in general in the United States, it's better to actually have a tariff, not taxes, not regular taxes like federal tax or state tax. It's better to have a tariff. Because if you don't want to be taxed, you just don't buy the product. But if the debt is issued, you don't have any control, and it's more pernicious because you're paying on that debt for 10 years, 20 years, depends on the bond issue, 7 years, but you're paying more. So it's more pernicious. That's the real issue here. But the legalese, the lawyers, the judges are going to focus on this one word, do they have the power for tariffs or not? And they're missing the big picture here. Our economic clustering has been gutted because Congress has been taken over by multinational corporations. And Congress is feckless.
Rules that the tariffs were illegal from the get-go, then the tariffs must be refunded to those that have paid them. And if we look, to date through at least the end of August, that means about $88 to $100 billion worth of tariffs would need to be refunded to the importers that paid those tariffs in the first instance. Because
but you had the Democrats saying that it's the end consumer that's absorbing it. Well, if that's the case, why doesn't the tariff cost go to the American consumer? Why isn't it this reimbursement? See, what's going to happen here? If there's, I don't think there's going to be a reimbursement. I think it's too complicated. But if you do a reimbursement and it goes to the corporations, then what has happened is that you've bought products, you've been partially tariffed. You're absorbing the tariff of some of this, about 1/3 to 50%. Most of it's 1/3. 1/3 of the cost of your goods that have been imported, you've absorbed that price. But 100% of the tariff is going back to the corporation that paid. See, what happens is that the corporation imports a good. The company has to pay a tariff to let's say that tariff is $100, right? That company has increased their products to be sold by $50. So they've absorbed $50 of the tariff and they've pushed it onto the consumer $50. And they've sold all the products and they brought in the money. So the corporation has sold all their products, they paid the tariff, their part of the tariff was $50. And the consumers paid a tariff of $50. All right? Through just higher prices. The company has received all the money already. All the money. All right? So they paid the 50, and the company has been able to get back 50 from the end user. So the government looks at it as you paid 100. They don't see the end user paying 50. So they give 100 to the company. The company now has made 50. Not get reimbursed, made 50. If none of that tariff that's being reimbursed goes to the end user. So basically what has happened is that the end user is now this is what's going to happen. The end user has now transferred money to the multinational corporation. The multinational corporation actually made money on this whole fiasco. If no end user gets a reimbursement, now how are you going to manage making sure that every single product that you bought across the United States, that the proper end user gets reimbursed? It's impossible. And this is the problem that I have with these dipshits. This is that if you do a reimbursement for tariffs to the corporations that paid the tariff, then those corporations, just by, business ethics, should have to reimburse their customers the amount that they paid in higher prices. It's crazy. It's crazy. So if they get a full amount, back, the corporations made money and that delta is the amount that the consumer absorbed in that price. Now, on average, it's about 1/3. But in some products, it's 50%. In other products, it's 100%. So how are you going to tease that all out in a complex economy that we have? You can't.
They're unlawful, then everyone is entitled to a refund with interest.
Is there a mechanism for doing that? That sounds like an enormous undertaking.
There is a mechanism, but you are correct, it is an enormous undertaking. And it basically splits out into whether or not the particular import of this particular item in this particular shipment, whether or not all of the paperwork that customs has to do about those has closed or not.
In the
See, they're only looking at, they are not, I'm telling you, these people are not looking at the end user. They are only looking at who paid the tariff. Well, who paid the tariff immediately during the importation of the good is the company. But the company also raised prices and consumers bought. So some of those tariffs were absorbed by the end user. But the government doesn't see that. It's not documented. So the end user is literally giving money to the corporation because the government's going to use taxpayer money to repay the actual tariff. This is follow me. This is really important. The company paid $100. The company raised the prices on the product to absorb 50% of the tariff. So the company took a hit of 50%. So it took $50 hit. They've raised their product $50. The consumer buys it. The company had a $50 hit. The government now is going to give them $100, and the company just made $50. Just on tariff trade. On top of any additional profit margin on the good that they sold. And the end user doesn't get a refund. If this tariff wasn't supposed to happen, why doesn't the end user get a refund? Why are we just so focused on the company? If the company, so what they're basically doing is they're saying the company doesn't push the cost to the end user. And we know that a certain percentage does get pushed to the consumer. How are they going to refund the consumer? Big problem. So the company is going to make money on this. And they get interest on it. Where do they get the money for the interest? Taxpayer money. So the end user gets screwed in the process. This is the reason why I keep on saying Congress should do their job. Do they care about the manufacturing in the United States? Then they need to add tariffs and force these companies to come back to the United States, because that's the only way you're going to do it. Oh, we're going to just give you some tax benefits. The tax benefits aren't as much as the labor arbitrage that they have and the regulatory arbitrage. You have to slap them on tariffs. Have to slap tariffs on these companies to force them to come back. So it's a great tool for the executive branch. Now, do I think that the Trump is utilizing the right statute to do this? No. No, and I think that SCOTUS is probably gonna strike down the usage of this tariff policy by the Trump administration. But Congress should be doing the right thing. But they won't. They won't, because they're beholden to the transnational capitalists. They're beholden to the global corporation. They don't care about the American people. I mean, you can just see someone that is talking. You have Bloomberg, one of the interviewers on Bloomberg, talking to government, and they're basically saying, well, if we have to reimburse, we're going to be reimbursing the company, even though the company pushed some of that tariff onto the end user. Another welfare transfer.
The Reform Administration, they have alternatives. I mean, you know the numbers better than I do. Section 301, Section 201, Section 337. They have a lot of different routes that they can impose various regulations and tariffs under.
Yes, and again, I do think it's very clear that the president loves tariffs. And so I think if the Supreme Court strikes down these tariffs, I do think you will see the president take up a number of these other laws and try to reimpose tariffs. But for me, there would be a pretty important distinction between them. First of all, with the one exception of the statute that's called Section 122, that would allow the president to declare that there is an emergency because we are experiencing a major balance of payments problems or currency difficulties. That would allow the president to impose a 15% across the board tariff on goods from every country, limited to 15% and limited to 150 days in length unless the Congress renewed it. All of the rest of the authorities that the president could turn to are going to be different than what he's done.
In the normal course, we'll likely get a ruling from the Supreme Court either later this year or sometime next year on this important question. At the same time, sometimes the court likes to, as it were, duck the problem. What are the routes available to the Supreme Court? Such as, for example, there's a dispute over subject matter jurisdiction. What are the chances the Supreme Court say, you know what, we don't need to decide this, we'll remand it for further proceedings?
That can happen. To me, if the Supreme Court is going to try to take a little bit of an off-ramp, a little bit of a compromise, and again, I think you've clearly seen the Chief Justice try to find, is there some compromise? I think the compromise there may be in whether or not the court rules that there is no authority to do tariffs ever under IEPA, or whether the court takes, as it's a little bit of an off-ramp, a view that IEPA permits some tariffs, but potentially, for example, not the trade deficit tariffs. I mean, the court could, in essence, say, we could read this word regulate importation to permit some tariffs, but what the president did in imposing this, worldwide.
No, what has happened is legalese allowed for people to gut the manufacturing of the United States and have these global corporations benefit from this massive sucking sound. Americans didn't benefit from this. You don't innovate unless you make, period. Now, do we make as much as we used to? No. So we aren't innovating as much. Okay, this is legal. It's so smart, they're stupid.
Not do, because the Congress has given him this separate authority under Section 122. The one thing that I think ought to give the court real pause about interpreting this phrase regulate importation or exportation is the fact that it is well established as a matter of law that you should read a word to have the same meaning within the statute. And in our Constitution, there is a ban on putting tariffs on exports. And the phrase within IEPA is regulate importation or exportation. So what the Trump administration is asking the court to do is to read that phrase. Regulate imports means tariff imports, but don't tariff exports, because that would be unconstitutional. And so they're asking the court to read that word regulate to have two entirely different meanings in the exact same phrase of the exact same statute. And that, at least to me, is a very tall order. So when I step back from it and say, you know, how likely is it that the court is going to say, yes, Trump, you can do this? I think the answer is, I think they're going to say no. And I think they're going to say no largely because there are other statutes in which the president can impose tariffs. He doesn't need to twist and bend and torture.
To solve the problem, you really need Congress to do their job, but they won't because they're captured and compromised. And we're going to have the gutting of our manufacturing base and our economic prowess based on a bunch of legalese.
In order to impose tariffs. And secondly, it is really hard to see how you read this one word regulate as having diametrically opposed meanings in the exact same phrase of the exact same statute. And yet that's what the Trump administration is saying that the court should be doing.
The IEPA case is foremost.
It's happening right now. It's happening to banking, blockchain, crypto. If change is happening in finance, then it's happening everywhere. And it's happening with Ripple.
What happened? Some bad people tried to hack me with sad information.
Sad, Craig?
No. We're protected.
AT&T Dynamic Defense helped protect us because small businesses need us.
So he's not sad. Guess we don't need these.
I think we do.
The IEPA case is foremost one of law, but it could have enormous consequences for businesses and consumers. Former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers says the economic argument in favor of tariffs is hard to make.
Look, I think the tariffs are unwise economic policy. I think on net, they push up prices. On net, they take money out of the hands of consumers.
Okay, if Larry Summers is right about this, he's only partially right. It's about 1/3 to 50%, depending on the product. But the thing is that if he's right, let's just assume he's right 100%, which he's not. But let's just say he is. All right, and that the prices are going up, and it's taking money away from the end consumer. Why the hell would the government reimburse with interest the corporation that raised the prices and not give it to the end user? Why doesn't the government reimburse the end user, the American citizen that had to pay a higher price on a good or a service? Why? Come on, Larry. All you got to say is the end user needs to be reimbursed. It's not that hard. It's not that. I know you're a smart guy. I know that you used to be president of Harvard. I know that you also helped deregulate the banking industry that led to Lehman. You can do it. I know you can. Come on.
And they're, in that sense, a self-inflicted supply shock that makes the Fed's job, makes everybody in the economy's job harder. So I think they are, for the most part, bad policy. I don't think we've used them successfully to get important other benefits from other countries and show the world will be better. The United States in particular will be better off. Indeed, the American manufacturing sector will be better off without these tariffs.
The two magic words in the statute, extraordinary and unusual, it says, is what we need to do to declare this national emergency. That is at least largely a factual question. How extraordinary or unusual are these balance of trade deficits, which the president invoked? As an economist, how unusual are these trade deficits?
I mean, I want to be fair, David, and recognize that there have been a lot of emergencies defined over time for a lot of different purposes, not all of which would be the kind of thing that if they happened in my family, we would call an emergency. So I think we do need to pay attention to the statutes and the history as well as that. And that's what the lawyers do and what the Supreme Court will deal with. But if you ask, is the United States in some kind of unprecedentedly disastrous situation of borrowing that is related to a lack of tariffs? The answer is absolutely not. If you ask the question, according to economics, are tariffs the right response to a foreign borrowing emergency? If there was a foreign borrowing emergency, the answer is no. The right measures would involve reducing the budget deficit, increasing the country's level of savings, for example. So I think it's pretty difficult to say that there's some aspect of the economic situation that's present today that hasn't been present for most of the last 25 years that would justify the invocation of emergency.
However we got here, we certainly have a large and growing deficit and debt. One of the arguments that President Trump is making is these tariffs are helping us with that. It's bringing in revenue to reduce that debt and deficit. Just on that limited issue, is he right?
The tariffs certainly are bringing in revenue, not nearly as much as he said they would, and I don't think the forecasts the administration makes that they'll get $1 trillion of revenue over the next year or two are likely to pan out. But yes, they are bringing in revenue, but they are also having other effects. They're holding interest rates higher than they would otherwise be. They are also slowing the economy, and those things make the deficit position worse. So I'm not sure that there's an important improvement in the budget deficit as a consequence of these tariffs. And certainly if you think of the budget deficit as some kind of emergency, these tariffs would be a very odd response to that kind of emergency.
I don't know. Not one word about reimbursing the end user. And Summers thinks that most of the tariff is being paid by the end user, which it's not. But let's just say it is. Not one word. Reimburse the end user. I'll tell you, literally the Supreme Court, by striking it down, and if it forces reimbursement, it's going to be a net positive. It's going to be profitable for the actual company. There'll be a net benefit. They'll get interest, and they're going to take the amount that the end user paid for in increased prices, and they're going to the government's going to give it to the corporation. Is that fair? Is that fair? How's that fair? I'm telling you, lawyers are stupid people. Lawyers in general, not all, but most lawyers, they went to law, not because they're smart, because smart people build stuff. Smart people can invent stuff. Lawyers, they just litigate, and cause more pernicious problems in the society. All right. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the digestive enzyme complex to help to break up your carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids, and to reduce the load on your digestive system. Taking digestive enzyme complex will help with your pancreas. Guess what? When you get older, your pancreas doesn't function as well. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Take the digestive enzyme complex and help with your digestion of carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. Olive leaf extract. It's dual purpose. Helps with your immune system and helps with your cardiovascular health. It brings down LDL levels, it increases your HDL levels, and brings down inflammation. And when you do that, you're reducing plaque formation. And by bringing down inflammation, also helps to boost up your immune system. And you're going to need to take that and boost up your immune system for the fall and winter season. Resveratrol, something I've been taking for decades. Resveratrol soaks up free radicals, helps the health of the mitochondria so you have more energy, Resveratrol helps with youthful gene expression and gets rid of cells that are in senescence. This helps you to slow down the aging process. In addition, resveratrol helps the basal layer for your skin. That's why you'll look younger. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the resveratrol. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. Amazing. All right, let's listen to Victor Hansen here about China.
What if you could clean your retainer at the touch of a button? No more brushing or tablets. Over 4 years ago, our team of engineers knew there had to be a quicker, easier, and more.
Donald Trump just met recently with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. They were trying to resolve the growing tensions over trade and tariffs. The United States did pretty well. We agreed to lower tariffs. They're still going to be nominally 47% on incoming Chinese goods, but China in return is going to drop tariffs against us. It's going to buy U.S. soybeans, and it's going to stop its blockade or embargo of rare earth materials. And so there was a give and take. But the question I have is why now, after all of this rhetoric of resistance, why is it willing to even talk to Donald Trump? I thought we were going to be in a trade war. I thought China was winning. The answer is that I guess Donald Trump exposed China for what it is.
America is going through a higher education transformation where students are realizing that what they want and need is a place that does participate in government agencies, the business sector, .edu/daily signal. It's go.pepperdine.edu/daily signal. Hello, this is Victor Davis Hansen for the Daily Signal. Donald Trump just met recently with Chinese leader Xi Jinping, and they had a mini summit of sorts, not a long one, but they were trying to resolve the growing tensions over trade and tariffs. And we'll let the analysts and the pundits sort out who won or who lost. But I think most people feel the United States did pretty well. In other words, although we agreed to lower tariffs, they're still going to be nominally 47% on incoming Chinese goods, maybe smaller or less severe in certain areas. But China in return is going to drop tariffs against us, restrictions about sending things into China, it's going to buy U.S. soybeans, and it's going to stop its blockade or embargo of rare earth materials. And so there was a give and take. But the question I have is why now is China willing, after all of this rhetoric of resistance, why is it willing to even talk to Donald Trump? I thought we were going to be in a trade war. I thought China was winning. And the answer is that I guess Donald Trump exposed China for what it is. We have been told by people on the right and left, if you gave China leeway, space, exemptions, forget about them cheating on copyrights, patents, forget about them manipulating currency, dumping product below the price of production, cost of production. Forget about their Belt and Road neo-imperialistic mercantile system. Forget all about that. They were even more insidious. The way that they transfer technology that they don't have and cannot produce is to send over 300,000 students and hope that 1 or 2 or 3%, several hundred or several thousand, would then engage in U.S. industry, universities, corporations, and send that expertise back. And they have been doing that for 30 or 40 years. There's another thing they do. They look and encourage DEI. They really think it's a great idea that we have dropped over the last 5 or 6 years meritocratic standards because they had done it in their own past. They know what Mao did. He took the intellectuals, he took the engineers, the scientific community, put them out in the field and treated them like peasants. This was his cultural revolution. 70 million people died, but more importantly, merit was not important. Ideology, that is communist ideology of the Chinese sort, made people get promoted or fired. And the result was China's economy imploded and people starved. And China thinks
gosh, this is really good that the United States is doing this. We got to really encourage how people that are Asian and people who are non-white are maltreated by the U.S. They also did it with the open border. They encourage it. They sent fentanyl in there that killed 70,000 people since 1999, probably when we first started to be aware and to document these accidental and deaths and suicide by fentanyl. 600,000 Americans have died. That's as many people that died in the Civil War. And China was supplying the raw product to the Mexican cartels. Maybe the biggest con they pulled off against the United States in particular, and the West in general, was the solar, wind, green agenda, global warming con. In other words, they captured the solar panel and the wind turbine market by dumping product below the cost of production, putting their Western rivals out of business, and then shipping vast amounts of green energy devices to the West while they did what? They built coal plants, they built nuclear plants, they built oil, hydroelectric plants. Yes, they had some green energy, but the point I'm making, they wanted us to have high cost, subsidized, and limited amounts of energy while they did just the opposite and would have more fossil fuels at their disposal for cheaper and more efficient energy and would further dominate the world global market. I could go on with Wuhan and their stonewalling about the origins and nature of the COVID virus, but here's the point. We were in a virtual war with China. They were ignoring any entreaty or effort to adjudicate with the Biden administration, with the Obama administration. Trump comes along and says, these are going to be your tariffs, these no more fentanyl, and blah, blah, blah. We have a big blowout, and suddenly China, I think, backs down and wants to talk. Why? Well, because we have a president that took out the Iranian nuclear facilities. We have a president that said to Israel, you were attacked on October 7th. Deal with Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis as you see fit. We have a president who said to Vladimir Putin during his first term, do not dare leave your borders, and who this time will adjudicate that war. We have a president that's achieved 6 or 7 ceasefire all over the globe. We have a president, we have an economy now where inflation is only about 3%. GDP may be over 3.5 at the end of the year. We were told that the tariffs would create a recession and crash the stock market. The stock market is at all-time highs, record highs. In other words, we have a very robust economy. We are preeminent on the world stage. Our military does not have a shortfall as it did in 2023 of 40,000 soldiers. We have completely met all of our recruitment. We're looking at all new types of weaponry, smaller companies, drones, artificial intelligence, robotics. It's a very dynamic time, both in the civilian sphere and in our military. Add it all up, and China says to itself, oh my gosh, we thought that the Americans were asleep. We kept poking it, and we woke this dragon up. And all of a sudden they think, you know what? We better be careful about buying farmland next to U.S. military bases. I thought they didn't care, or they were too weak to stop us. We got to be careful about sending balloons across the United States. They'll shoot it down in 2 seconds. We've got to be very careful about cyber warfare. We won't go to Alaska and dress down and insult their diplomats like we did with Sullivan and Anthony Blinken. In other words, China is trying to be nice to us because it's afraid, because it understands that the United States always had the potential as a free, consensual society to be more dynamic, stronger, and have a much greater role in the world. And then by our own volition, by our own lack of confidence, by our own divisiveness, we adopted policies that China encouraged because they knew they would weaken us, and suddenly that's all gone with the wind. It's as if the United States said to China, you think you're winning and you think you're going to take advantage of us. We're in a renaissance, and all we have to say is, not yet, China, not yet.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Good Night Formulas This will help you to get into those 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep to consolidate memory, detoxify your central nervous system, and be well rested. When you do this regularly, you're going to slow down the aging process. This has tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flower. Take the Good Night formula every night, drink it with filtered water. Omega-3 helps your cardiovascular health. It brings down inflammation and helps your lipid profile. Super important. And it prevents your red blood cells from overclotting. Vitamin B complex, super important if you're 40 years of age or older. It'll help to improve the health of your mitochondria and increase your ATP levels, rev up your cellular metabolism, and protect your neurons. Clarity factor, the very powerful neurostack, gets rid of that brain fog, allows you to concentrate on tasks, and over time increases your neuroplasticity, your positive neuroplasticity. That way you're thinking faster and your memory is improved. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Take the Clarity Factor every day, especially if you're a student. And vitamin D. Vitamin D is super important. It allows you to absorb calcium. If you do resistance training, it'll help to create denser bone, super important. And vitamin D3 helps to get rid of cells that need to go into apoptosis, especially if they're infected. And vitamin D3 helps the cardiovascular system. Please go to my store and get the vitamin D3. All right, let's go to Hugh Hewitt. Talking about Mamdani, the communist.
Being in Grace, America, I am Hugh Hewitt, joined by the one and only Ben Dominant. She is host of the Big Ben podcast and editor-at-large at The Spectator. Of course, she's a Fox News contributor. And Ben, welcome. I'm going to go in reverse order of the Big Ben podcast this week, because I find your conversation with Charles Murray to be fabulous. And it reminded me of, until he died, Pitch was about a weekly guest on the Hugh Hewitt show. And
He's a conservative. I don't mind him, all right? But I guarantee you that he won't say anything about Plato, saying that Plato warned us in the Republic that democracy through the mob rule of the plebs will lead to tyranny. What are we seeing in New York today? The beginnings of tyranny. I guarantee you that he's not going to talk about the Enlightenment by John Locke, about life, liberty, and property, and how that's the foundation of our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And that our Constitution is a constitutional republic, guaranteeing property rights, because our founding fathers understood that mob rule could try to take away those property rights. That's why we're not a democracy. We're a constitutional republic. But what does Mamdani want? He wants to take away your property. So Mamdani is anti-enlightenment, pro-Marxist. And not only that, he's the Trojan horse to allow in a caliphate into the United States. The heart of the United States, New York City. Now we have a Trojan horse that's going to push in a caliphate. Thank you, America. God. All right. Conservatives need to start citing Plato. Conservatives need to start citing the issues that Nietzsche saw with the slave morality and the virtues of the master morality. Now, people will misinterpret what those terms mean. You need to listen to Nietzsche, all right? Because your modern interpretation of words is just wrong. Now, in addition, we need to be very forceful against Marxism. And we need to be pro-enlightenment. And the idea that our property rights are important to protect because the mob will try to take it away.
Sometimes we did 3-hour shows after we did God Is Not Great. Did a 3-hour show with Dr. Mark Roberts, a very accomplished theologian. Great interview, 3-hour program. Did a 2-hour program with David Allen White from the Catholic perspective. I love talking about that stuff, and because I think it's pretty easy. Apologetics is pretty easy to do. Were you surprised by Charles Murray's decision to write a book about it at what, 80, 81?
I actually I did not have this on my bingo card. I mean, I did not expect that. One thing I will say is that, you know, I've interviewed Charles a lot. I think I'm trying to remember if I probably interviewed him for the first time probably around 2010. And, you know, he's obviously someone who has been, you know, a titan of kind of the intellectual right, a not uncontroversial one, obviously, but also someone who I always found to be, when I talked to him, extremely unlike the caricature that is painted of him by many of his opponents on the left. And so, to a certain extent, I'm not surprised that he would be able to approach a topic of such significance with depth and nuance, because I know that he's certainly capable of that, and that anybody who's painted him in a false light over the years would be, you know, shocked to learn that that's the kind of thing that he can do. At the same time, I think that he's also someone who had to be, as we detailed in the interview, prompted to do it because he didn't think anybody would be all that interested. And that, you know, there's an element of him, having known him a little bit over the years, that always sticks out to me as being perhaps, you know, because of his experience with the bell curve and everything like that, hesitant to kind of go out there with things. And one of the most critical elements of this to me was his observations about his own personal animus toward people who had deeply felt religious beliefs, because he thought that that was something that smart people did not believe. And I think that him admitting that is significant, because I think it's something that, quite frankly, a lot of people in his class, in the think tank class, the thinker class on the right, actually do think and hold to. And it's a sad state of affairs, because I wish that they would reconsider that. And even if it is simply to take another look at this, you know, understand the significance it holds for so many people, and think about it in the same way that Charles has, analytically, logically, look at it and say, what am I missing? And be open to the idea that you are missing something.
The book is called Taking Religion Seriously. And to get an introduction to it, listen to the latest edition of the Big Ben podcast, because it is very self-explanatory. He got there via the argument of design. And that has always been to me the most obvious reason that one has to believe that the created order is not accidental. It's too complex. It's too amazing. And Hitch and I would argue about that for a long time. Every time we talk about it, I used to moderate debates for him at Biola and other places, because the argument from the, you know,
you went into Biola with Hitch. I gotta look that up. Is that on YouTube?
I'm sure it is, but I was the moderator. I was not his opponent. His opponent was William Wayne Craig. And I gotta say, debating Hitch is not a fair proposition.
It's a monumental. I mean, you know, he can make quick work of you. And the other thing about Hitch, and then people who are debaters will notice, is that you can understand that Hitch is somebody who could debate both sides of a question, which is the most dangerous person to take on in any circumstance like that. I would argue that if Hitch had wanted to write a book in favor of the existence of God and the divinity of Jesus Christ, it probably was an incredibly powerful book.
The first vanity website I ever did, I did a vanity website years ago called Hugh and Hitch, or Hitch and Hugh, or something like that. Because I interviewed him more than 70 times, usually for as long as I talked to you, and sometimes much longer. Hitch is an amazing intellect, but Dawkins did not have the winsomeness of Hitchens when it came to debating. Dawkins, in fact, you should go find that cut if you could, Adam. Go ahead, Ben.
The one thing I was going to say about Dawkins is that I believe Richard Dunn. Go ahead.
Play that clip first.
Okay, do you believe Jesus turned water into wine?
Yes.
You seriously do?
Yes.
You actually think that Jesus got water and made all those molecules turn into wine?
Yes.
My God.
Yes,
Okay.
my God, actually not yours. And so that's how it went.
Look, I just think that this is, it's very worth, I think, paying attention to that someone of Charles Murray's intellect who basically, had gone away from this for logical reasons before and then came back to it for logical reasons in his older age and not out of some, a desperate attitude for death or anything like that. And he makes it very clear in his book. He questions himself.
Sound familiar? At Mattress Firm, we understand there are many problems that can keep you up at night, like snoring, aches and pain.
He questions himself and the hubris that he has as a younger man. And I think that that's something that is worthwhile, and especially in this political era when it's loath to admit such things, I think it's worth people's time to pay attention to it.
I also think people ought to study apologetics because the argument from design is ancient. I mean, it really is prime mover. It goes way back. And I'm surprised it took a smart guy like Murray that long. I love the idea of the Pariah Club, the Pariah Chess Club, though. Can you imagine what the conversation was at the Pariah Chess Club, which included Charles Krauthammer and Charles Murray?
Well, the thing is, so Charles was someone who was a green room colleague and an acquaintance, but his son Daniel is an actual friend. I actually have to follow up with him about that because I want to hear about if he ever got to listen in on the Pariah.
Yes.
Because that is something that I would definitely like to know about.
Daniel wrote or helped compile the second book of Charles's essays and came on to help promote it when it came out. He's a fabulous guy. I think he's a filmmaker, isn't he?
Yeah, yes, and he also is one of these people who dabbles in everything and is somehow incredibly good at all of it. It's one of those frustrating types. But he's exceptional. I actually think if he put his mind to it, he would be a regular in replacement of you and me on Special Report. But that's something that he has chosen not to do with his life.
Well, let me ask you about the fact that Charles Murray and you were talking about Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell's in his 90s. Charles is in his 80s. I'm going to be 70 before many more years go by. And, we're going to roll off the table. We're going to go, Charles doesn't stop. He's an inspiration to me. And Thomas never stopped. He's an inspiration to me. So I won't stop, but I'm not going to work that hard. And God, hope I get a lot of years to play with my grandkids, but you never know. You get 70. Do you think the public intellectual arena is doing a good job of teeing up the next generation?
I wish it was doing a better job. Unfortunately, I don't think that it's really nailing it. And I think a big part of that is the distraction currently of different and various methods of media. That being said, I actually have a piece in the latest edition of the Spectator that goes into the fact that Thomas Sowell is, despite what you might expect, as old as he is, as long as he has been around, an incredible force when it comes to being an internet influencer. He is all over the place. His memes, the quotes, the people reacting to videos of him talking to Peter Robinson and others, and Coleman Hughes, who's a brilliant young guy, had a great observation when we were out. Charles and I were at the Hoover Institution together for something appreciating Thomas, and he had the observation that despite all of his long-winded books and things that are sort of doorstops in terms of their size, that Thomas always had a gift for the straightforward comment, the pithy observation that cuts through the BS that is foisted upon people by those who are trying to use big words to bamboozle you. And that's something that I think is very powerful. It's Orwellian in a sense, something that cuts through. And I think that in this internet age, that's something that people have a lot of desire for.
Yeah, I'm never going to forget Charles Murray telling Ben Domenech that Thomas Sowell would not allow him to write an essay that referred to his being burdened by growing up in Harlem in the 40s by the slights and the discrimination of that era, because Thomas Sowell said there weren't any. Now, I don't know that that's the common experience. He might have been too smart to notice, but Charles Murray telling that story is absolutely gold.
You would think that would be just something that he could just write and it would be fine, but no. And that's, I think, what makes Thomas so special.
Don't go anywhere. I'm gonna talk with
Just an American trait.
I'm going to talk with Ben during the break. On the other side, we're going to talk about Comrade Mamdani. During the break, we're going to talk about Jay Jones, our new Attorney General, Ben and my new Attorney General, and what that means for American politics. Stay tuned. Now with Ben Dominich for a quick three.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the ashwagandha root. This will help to control your cortisol levels and your blood glucose levels. Super important. Bring down that inflammation. Turmeric will soak up free radicals and bring down inflammation. And lignans will help your immune system and your endocrine system, brings down inflammation and soaks up free radicals. When you stack these together, it's a very powerful stack to slow down the aging process, boost up your immune system. And by bringing down inflammation, you're also helping your vascular system and your brain function. Protect those neurons by bringing down that inflammation, super important, and controlling your blood glucose levels. A lot of people don't realize if you have elevated glucose levels, you're doing damage to your neurons and your nerves. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Take the lignans, the turmeric, the ashwagandha, stack them together. It's a very powerful stack to slow down the aging process, and take this during the fall and the winter season to boost up that immune system. It's a very powerful stack. Please go to my store. Take my advice. Make sure you use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. In addition, get the collagen. This will help with your skin, your nails, your hair, your musculature, your bone density, even your joints. Take it every day. Make sure you do some resistance training. Please go to my store and get the collagen.
Reaction on Jay Jones being elected after his text wishing death upon his colleagues and suffering upon his colleagues' children. I didn't think it was possible saying so, Joe. Ben, what do you think?
Well, look, I think that this is a very sad thing to declare, Hugh, but I actually think that Jay Jones's comments probably helped him more than they hurt him. That is the really scary thought. Because if you look at the simple data here, there are more people who voted for Jay Jones after he had those comments exposed than before. And that's not just in the early voting, it's, of course, including the election day. So it's a little bit skewed. But the point is simply that you would expect to see a race get closer, and it didn't. And that, to me, is an indictment of everything that we have going on in America, but also an indication of what works with the Democratic base. When they go in to those voting booths where no one is looking, they are unashamed of voting for Jay Jones. And that's something that, I do not like to condemn my neighbors without, confronting them directly or anything like that. But it's one of these things I think we just have to accept about the current state of affairs. That the attitude that Charlie Kirk deserved what he got, that you would like to see more Republicans suffer, that you would like to see their families suffer, their children suffer. That is not a negative within today's Democratic Party. They, I think, on some level know that. It's why you saw the Washington Post come out the day before the election and say that this was a contest between partisanship and human decency. Well, Virginia failed that test, and Virginia, of all states, having, and being someone who's lived in it for the vast, overwhelming majority of my life, I can say, they have a bit of a civility fetish. they like the fact that people can get along across these different lines. That's why people were so horrified when things like the blackface controversy happened with Ralph Northam and with his attorney general as well, by the way. And that's something that, in the past would have given people pause. Now they feel licensed to embrace this type of extremism, and we should take them at their word that this is the kind of thing that they support. They've proven it.
Let me get a completely wild speculation here. Jerry Golden, Democrat of Maine, has announced he's not running for re-election, and the reason he cited were threats against his family. He doesn't want to spend another Thanksgiving in a hotel because he's a very brave man. He's a Marine. Just guess. Do you think those threats came from the left or from the right? We got 30 seconds, Ben.
I would almost, in the absence of knowledge, I would put a very heavy bet And I would take points on it that it came from the left and not.
Me too. Because he is identified with the anti-trans in athletes.
Yeah,
and
I think that any pro-Israel Democrat should expect to experience that as well in the coming cycle.
Wow, we are in a bad place. Coming right back with Ben Domenech. Don't go anywhere. We're going to talk about Comrade Mamdani after this. Here with Ben Domenech.
Spreadsheet killed my sales. Wait, just try Python.
Discover pipeline sales, DRM.
Buying a car is kind of a big deal. You need to see all the options. See, she knows. Car Gurus gives you the most new and used car.
Here with Ben Domenech. Ben, time to talk about Comrade Mamdani. I enjoyed your conversation with Caroline Downey today. Although I must say, when she said housing is definitely unattainable for her generation, she's Gen Z, I don't believe that. I had a 13.5% mortgage when the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I bought our first house in 1985. It's not unattainable. You just can't live in New York City.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. I think that if I had to, parse that a little bit, I think she was referring mostly to the New York City situation. But I agree with you. And I also think, by the way, that there's a lot of things that have to do with this that are simply about attitudes towards saving and managing money that the youth no longer have, meaning that you have certain things that you assume you have to pay for in order to have a conceivable life. And I know that I've whined about this in the last segment of the show, but the simple fact that we have the kind of outpouring of expenditures toward content is something that, in the past, with I grew up in a family that had radishes. We didn't have cable until after I went to college. And so the idea that these things are all completely necessary for a life, look, it's the kind of thing where I'm not asking you to be to suddenly be a trad wife when it comes to managing, baking your own bread and buying flour in gigantic, drums from Costco. It's more along the lines of saying, look, you can save for these kinds of things, and yes, it is not ideal, but frankly, you're going to get a lot more out of it than you will out of that college education. It's depending on where you go. And you also are going to be, I think, in a position where if you make the right choices along those lines, you can afford it. This is the problem, though, because that's all of that I just said to you, that's oatmeal. That is serving people the rule that they do not want to hear in this day and age. Look, it's the reality, but it's also something that Republicans haven't figured out a way to really message in response to. At the same time, I just have to say that it is a stunning factor of the shallow nature of young women in New York City that they would go for Mamdani by the numbers that they did, simply because he's a cute guy who looks good when he smiles. I'm sorry, that is just a fact. That's a reality. The human nature is what it is, and dressing up socialism in the form of a young, good-looking guy who does not have the various ephemera of food that seems to always be attached to Bernie Sanders' blazers is a significant upgrade for socialism.
Now, I got to say, I had because of miscommunication, I had to share a ride with a fellow stranded person who happened to be a professor of law at Yale, lives in the city. And he drives up to New Haven a couple of times a week to teach. And so we were riding along. I said, look, Comrade Mamdani wants rent control for everything in the city. Can that be done? And he said, he's a property professor, by the way. And Yale said, yes, it will take him a year. Do you know what that's going to do, Ben, to New York? That will destroy housing stuff. Do people not understand basic economics anymore?
No, I don't think that they do. And I think that that's, basic economics by Thomas Sowell, by the way, is not something that is assigned in almost any of the graduate courses that any of these people went through. But it's also something that I think is important.
First of all, most schools, all right, in the United States, you have to take macro or micro, sometimes both. All right. Now, the problem comes in is that usually the professors are pushing socialism. All right. But you do take macro and microeconomics. I had to take both, but some schools you just take one, either micro or macro. But in the macro, you know, I think the newer generation out there, the last 20 years or so, these students are seeing elements of socialism or Marxism peppered into their education, right? But they do take economics. This is bullshit that they don't take economics. They do take economics. The problem is that when they take their psychology or sociology classes, they're really gearing for this whole inequality. You need, this gender dysphoria, the wokeism. So if you look at the totality of the core requirements, the general requirements of an education, that coupling of psychology, sociology, and macroeconomics, it is molding some of these individuals into this socialistic mentality, especially when they get out of college, they have high debt, they are not getting a good job because they didn't study hard enough to be an engineer or study hard enough to be in STEM, and they picked a path that was a little bit easier. A humanities degree is easier than an engineering degree, right? So, or some sort of STEM degree. And I think that's a part of it. But most schools in the United States do have students go through macro, microeconomics. And in most cases, it's both. It's a year of it.
People not understanding that socialism, as much as it sounds good, has never delivered on these promises. It cannot deliver on these promises, and it will not deliver on these promises. And that's why I think ultimately Mamdani is going to spawn imitators, but they will be stylistic imitators, as opposed to people who promise the kind of ridiculous, unicorns for everyone things that he has promised, because they're ultimately going to be unachievable. At the same time, you're going to see, I think, an incredible level of spin from, MS, from CNN to the degree that they can, from the Condé Nast folks who've already been plastering him all over their covers. They are going to spin this as much as they can until it becomes undeniable that he is failing. And then we'll see how they deal with it. One thing that I do think is hilarious, though, is I think that AOC should be thanking her lucky stars that Zoran Mamdani is not eligible to run for president.
You bet.
Because the simple fact is...
Right. That's true. He sounds like, Zoran Mamdani sounds like Barack Obama, but he's not going to be president because he's a naturalized citizen. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the citrus deodorant or the peppermint lavender and tea tree deodorant. It's dual purpose. Use it as a deodorant and it will help to detoxify your body. It's made from essential oils from the Himalayas, extremely high quality ingredients. It's for males and females. Get a couple bars for your household. Help support the work that I do and help support your health and wellness. And get the drops and lozenges for the fall and winter season. And they're great as a gift for stockings for the holiday season. Get the drops in honey and lemon, in cherry flavor, or even in blueberry. I also have the lozenges in elderberry zinc. These are very high quality drops and lozenges. You take them right when you have that throat irritation or someone around you has an issue. So please be prepared for the fall and the winter season. Mitigate the problem right away. Go to my store and get the deodorants and the lozenges and drops. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order.
That by 2028, he might be more popular than her, at least in the mindset of Gen Z, if they can spin him the way that they would like to.
Now, Ben, I'm hoping out loud and in print that the Republican National Committee Digital Division has already set up a war room to follow the Mamdani record
his promises, his delivery, where are the grocery stores, where are the free buses, where's the rent control? Do you think they know he's their face that they've got to focus on and follow the Alinsky, the rules for radicals for Alinsky, objectify and ridicule? It's going to be ridiculous what he does. You think the RNC is ready for that?
I don't think they are. I think that they've been deluding themselves a little bit about the nature of this threat for a while. And it's unfortunate because I think it's been pretty clear. And look, we haven't talked about it, and there's too little time left to talk about it in this segment. But the simple fact is, this is a horseshoe theory situation. To see the kind of, Hugh, I don't know if you've seen the list of demands that the DSA had leaked about what they want from this Mamdani regime.
No, I have not.
Every single one, you can find it on X.
Turn up the volume. I'm Beros Mero Mamdani. I'm chairman of the Federation of Local Authorities.
Every single one, you can find it on X. All of them have to do with Israel. All of them have to do with, breaking the city from Israel in every single respect, restoring any of the people who had gotten, removed from various city universities and the like back to their jobs, giving people passes and if they had any, criminal liability when it came to their protests in the past. And it's just an indication that at a certain level, this really is about an anti-Israel movement on the left. That, look, the right has a podcaster problem. The left has a mayor of New York City problem.
You got 300,000 people working for him, and if no one's going to wear their Star of David to work anymore, I think. Ben, very quick, we got 2 minutes. People say horseshoe theory all the time. I know what it means, you know what it means, but we have Steelers fans listening. Would you define what it is?
Steelers fans, who I hope are pretty happy after taking it away from Indianapolis. So look, horseshoe theory is best understood as this. At the far ends of both spectrums of the right and left, there is overlap. And that overlap is driven by anti-elite sentiment, by a shared sort of anti-capitalist, sometimes they would say globalist attitude toward various things. But it also shares increasingly in recent years a shared faith in anti-Semitism and an obsession with the Jewish question or something along those lines. They might not frame it that way. Not everybody is blatant as some of these podcasters are in terms of their admiration for Adolf Hitler and things like that. But here's the thing. There are people who have been incredibly accused of saying things that are anti-Semitic along the lines over the years, perhaps unfairly. But there are people who just openly embrace it, and those are not people who you should waste any time on. From my perspective, they are not part of your coalition. All of these folks who are in this current, conflagration on the right openly campaigned against Donald Trump in 2024. They are not part of your coalition. You do not need to reach out to them. You do not need to include them in anything, and you should not give them the time today.
Amen, amen. Again, I say amen. And shunning is the best strategy. Ben Domenech, follow him on X at B Domenech. Go get the latest Big Ben pop.
What we need to do is remind the Marxist that communism has never worked. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and support capitalism. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Go to my store and get the C60. You can get it in MCT coconut oil, avocado oil, and extra virgin olive oil. You can get a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. It is cheaper per ounce to get the higher ounce configuration. Take a teaspoon a day, every day. Preferably on an empty stomach, like in the morning. Take it every day, and what we'll do is it's going to soak up free radicals 1,000 times more potent than a molecule of vitamin C. One molecule of C60 is 1,000 times stronger than a molecule of vitamin C. Now, soaking up those free radicals at the cellular level is going to improve the cell's performance, reduce the stress in the cell, and improve the energy creation of the cell. It soaks up free radicals and it helps the health of the mitochondria. You'll have more ATP and you'll have more energy. You'll start feeling the effects of this within 2 months. In addition, by soaking up those free radicals regularly, your tissues and your organ systems will perform better. Your immune system will perform better. Your endocrine system will perform better, even your brain. Why? Because by soaking up free radicals at the neuron level, your neurons will perform better, have less stress, and have more energy. So it's producing more neurotransmitters. And over time, you'll have positive neuroplasticity. In addition, by soaking up free radicals at the vascular level, you're reducing the concentration of oxidized LDL. When you have less oxidized LDL, you have less plaque formation. So to help your cardiovascular health, taking C60 is super important. And within 1 year, you're going to notice visibly you look younger. Please go to my store, take a teaspoon a day every day. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off anywhere. This is a cornerstone to slowing down the aging process. Please go to my store and get the C60. It stacks really well with resveratrol, clarity factor, NAD+, and ubiquinol. Click the link in the description, go to my website, and get the great products that I offer. Make sure you use discount 5. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Thank you for listening. That's the end of the broadcast. It's really important to fight communism, to fight socialism, and to maintain our constitutional freedoms. Because socialism and communism wants to erode your property rights. They want to erode the very foundation of the Enlightenment. Please go to my store and help support the work that I do. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.